Welcome to Conscious Living here at the Specially Produce Network. We are so glad you're here to support your lifestyle with the fastest growing resource for conscious families. So sit back, relax, connect, and enjoy. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to Conscious Living. I'm here live in the studio in San Diego at Specially Produce Network, and I'm here with Small Footprint Family. Welcome, Dawn Gifford. It's so exciting to have you here.
Thank you, Ashley. It's really nice to be here this morning. It's rainy, but which is unusual for San Diego, so it's nice to be cozy here with you.
It is nice to be cozy. We're going to cozy up together to talk about such an amazing process that we can create in our lives called radical simplicity.
My website, Small Footprint Family, is all about how to create greater environmental sustainability starting at home. Because really that's where everything starts, with ourselves in our own households. And then from there, we can join our communities in the world. So once we get things straight at home, we can have greater health, greater enjoyment, greater connection. And part of that, what I've come to after doing this work for quite some time now, is that one of the most powerful things that we can do to be more sustainable, to save money, to have a simpler and more self-sufficient pace of life, is to simplify.
Simplify. I love it.
Simplify. It's kind of trendy now with Marie Kondo and the idea of, getting rid of all the things that don't spark joy. And that would certainly simplify your possessions and the amount of, material goods that you have in your life. But I'm suggesting we actually sort of Marie Kondo the rest of our life, too.
There you go. I love it.
And essentially, the way I like to define simplicity is taking as many steps as possible between you and the things that you need out, so that the route is as direct and as clean and as simplified as it can be.
Wow. What does that mean?
Well, most of our lives are extremely complex. So, the food that we buy off of the boxes on the grocery store shelves have been through myriad processes. Some wheat field far, far away from us, grown by, farmers with machines far, far away from us, run through mills and other, factories to create the pasta that goes in the box that is then shipped, hundreds and hundreds of miles back to us. So we have this very complex process to simply get food onto our table. And that process can be disrupted at any stage of it. So if there's a drought and the wheat doesn't produce, then that's going to change the cost of, the pasta or the bread that you buy. Or if there's a strike, or if there's a natural disaster that blocks the shipping route, or, any number of things could happen along the way that are going to change and influence whether or not that food gets to you. But if you pick a tomato out of your garden,
right,
that tomato is right there. There's one step, maybe, 2 steps, in terms you need to grow it. And you pick that tomato, you know where it came from, you know what went into it, and you have a sense of connection and a sense of value for it that you don't get when your food is just delivered to you on a shelf, on a box, without that connection.
Right.
And it's sustainable. If your tomato plant fails, then your neighbor's tomato plant is probably doing okay. And if not that, then the farmer's market, which is down the road, probably has a lot of tomatoes too. So part of a system that is much simpler, it has far fewer steps in it, that not only simplifies the way that you get food, but connects you more deeply to yourself, your community, the land that you live on, the bioregion that you live in.
That's so amazing, and thank you for illustrating that, because I think we really do not see all the steps that it takes to get the products or the services that we want, and not knowing how complicated that was to get there. I really, really agree. That's just amazing, and we can even look at it from other aspects too, like our clothing, right? And what does that mean, right? I mean, where do we? I haven't been shopping in a long time, but Where do our clothes come from? What do, because we're rather disassociated from that process
Right.
as well.
The fashion industry is the second most polluting industry after petroleum. So it's really the worst. Not the worst of the worst, but the second worst.
Wow.
And that's because most of our fabrics are made in factories in Asia, where the environmental standards are not very high, and they can dump the used dyes and other chemicals used to make these fabrics directly into the waterways.
Wow.
And it's really quite gross.
So we have a lot of impact on our environment that we may not
We
realize is
do.
happening.
And when our fabrics and our fashion is coming from so far away, and it's shipped across the seas, we don't have a sense. It's very easy for us to go spend $8, $15 on a shirt at Walmart or something, and then just throw it away next season and buy another one.
Right. Oh, wow.
So we don't really have a sense of, or if it's not trendy anymore, we'll go buy the next fashion trend because it
Yeah.
doesn't cost very much.
Right.
We don't pay a lot at the store for our clothes, but the natural environment is paying an enormously high price that we don't see because we don't have to look at the horribly polluted ecosystems in India and China and other places where they're making our fashions.
I see.
But the good news is that I believe more people are buying used clothing now than buying new clothing.
That's
And that's a
awesome.
way of simplifying how you get your clothes. I mean,
Right.
it could be as easy as, most kids are familiar with the hand-me-down phenomenon.
Yes.
If the clothes are still in relatively decent shape, they're going from the bigger kid to the little kid,
Right.
It just
Right.
doesn't make sense to buy new things for a kid who's going to roll in the mud all day.
Right.
Um, but secondhand stores, especially now that everyone's Marie Kondoing everything,
Yes.
you can get some really amazing clothing at a good thrift store or consignment shop.
Many of the young adults are doing that. They're showing me, and I'm like, oh, really? Wow, where'd you get that?
Right? So I haven't bought anything new in a very long time for that reason, because the thrift stores have so much great stuff in them here.
Yeah.
And you can get it for a fraction of the price. And you're not contributing to this fashion industry that's just pumping out cheap new clothes for every new season trend.
Yeah.
So there's a way of simplifying, one of the things that we purchase or consume.
That's a beautiful sense of really understanding where we're coming from and really what it is we're creating and putting on our bodies and noticing or having the awareness of what impact it does create to our environment.
Right.
It's so powerful.
Right.
What are other ways that you see that we can be simplistically sustainable?
One of the things that I like to recommend to people, in part because it has so many benefits that besides just the obvious one, and that is to take up an old world skill as a hobby.
Wow.
It could be something like gardening or beer making or fermenting vegetables or knitting or I don't know, it could be any number. You could raise chickens in your backyard. Just something that's, an old world skill, something that slows you down.
Meal prep, maybe, and cooking,
It could be meal prep and cooking.
right?
Um,
Some of us aren't so good at that.
right, especially if you're cooking like whole foods.
Right.
Learning to bake bread from scratch, for example,
Yeah.
or how to prepare a meal that's entirely made from, ingredients.
Right.
As opposed to packaged products.
Right. Right. I'm good. I've got my whole pantry full. Right.
Right. So
A food that can last 10 years. No, just kidding.
right. If you're feeling adventuresome, you could take up beekeeping or something like that.
Yeah.
But these
that'd be
old
neat.
world skills are not only fun and diversionary, a great way to unwind after a busy day at work or at school. You can involve your kids in a lot of them.
Yes.
You can get an actual product out of it if you're gardening or baking bread or brewing beer or something. So you get to enjoy the fruits of your labor, so to speak. And it also connects you, especially if you're doing something like gardening or beer making or something, it connects you to your local community because you need to know more about how things grow, whether your neighbor is having trouble with their zucchini, and maybe you can trade some zucchini for some tomatoes, or if you're brewing, then you probably want to meet other people who brew in your area. And there's like different meetups and community groups for that, where
Right.
people who brew come together and talk about and share their
Yeah,
tips.
San Diego,
for-
we have a huge community for it.
Right, exactly. And that's all kinds of brewing, whether it's mead or cider or beer or kombucha.
Right.
we ferment all the things here. But these are also great activities to involve your kids in too.
Yes.
And you know, my daughter and I, we like to do archery,
Uh-huh.
and with the old school bows and everything. So that gets us outside. It gets us, practicing hand-eye coordination and gives us quality time together. We shoot outdoors in a forested range, and so it's a valuable skill as
Yeah.
well. So, and if she wanted to ever be competitive with it, she could.
Right.
So,
Right. Oh, that's so beautiful. So creating old world skills, right?
right,
So that means non-media skills, right? Like on a
right,
tablet or something like that. How
exactly.
quickly can we move our thumbs?
Basically, you're going to unplug that tablet, put the phone down, and step away for an hour, however long you want, and have to take the time to, pull the weeds in the garden, check the bottles and make sure they're brewing properly, check in on the bees, or, spend some time on that blanket you're knitting, whatever it is. The point is to unplug. The point is to have quality time with your family, with yourself, to be quiet with your own thoughts.
Yeah.
And to connect with the natural world, whether that's through the ingredients that you're cooking or through just actually being outdoors. To remember why we're doing all of this. Why are we recycling? Why are
Engaging in
we.
this way.
Exactly.
And
Why
what
are we.
impact does it create?
Exactly.
Because when we do start to think along those lines, it really opens the doors for new thoughts and new creativity. So, for example, I don't know, if we're recycling, maybe we can recycle specifically, and that gets
Right.
it to the right places at the right times with the right resources.
Right. And maybe we can choose things that don't have any packaging in the first place
Yeah.
so that we don't even have to worry about that step.
I like that idea of really
That's
going to like having all of your garbage in a mason jar by the end of the year.
right.
I'm like, wow, that's a great, great goal to accomplish.
It is. And there's a lot of little baby steps, and people can grab whatever low hanging fruit is immediately apparent to them in their household and in their lifestyle.
Right.
I have a little mini book that's free on my website that gives you basically 50 steps. It's called 50 Ways to Love Your Mother, sort of a riff off the old Paul Simon song. To just it's the low hanging fruit. Recycling things, composting things, using reusable straws made out of stainless steel instead of plastic. Really
Right.
basic stuff that you could probably do almost all of them in a weekend.
Right.
But what I'm talking about and I'm enjoying discussing with you right now is going deeper than that. I mean,
Yeah.
we can do all of these, 1, 2, 3 steps,
Right.
and we should do them. But the underlying motivation underneath why we're doing them
So important.
is important. And sometimes we can forget the forest for the trees, and
Yeah.
we're so worried about recycling in the right bin or buying the right glass containers or making the right homemade cleaners that don't have toxins in them, or whatever it is that we're doing.
Yeah.
We forget about. We make that process just as complex and stressful and convoluted
Yeah.
as anything else we're doing in life.
Yeah. Exactly.
When it's important to remember, why we're doing all of this. Maybe we don't actually need to buy anything.
Right.
I sometimes advocate that people, if they're able to take a spend fast. So for
A spend fast.
spend fast.
I love it.
So for a given period of time, it could be 3 months, 6 months, a year, you decide, but just commit to that time period. And within that time period, you spend no money whatsoever on anything except bills. Obviously, you have to pay your mortgage and
Right.
your electricity and such. Food, you obviously have to eat. Medications, because those are life-saving and important. Toiletries, if you need toothpaste, you need toothpaste.
Yeah.
Underwear, if you need new underwear.
Yeah. Some of that shopping.
Right. And anything else that's sort of a non-negotiable necessity.
Yeah.
Just you must have in your life. Everything else, like no coffees out, cancel the magazine subscriptions, read them online. Instead of seeing that movie, maybe you hang out and watch videos with your family.
Right.
Instead of eating out, you
Right.
buy that food and you cook it in.
Right.
Basically just take a break on spending any money whatsoever for a short period of time, except on the absolute necessities.
Yeah.
More as not a permanent way of life, but as an exercise in seeing how little you actually really need.
Right.
At the end of the 3 months, you'll say, oh my gosh, I saved however many dollars
Right.
because I didn't do this, this, and this. And do I really need to buy lunch every day? I mean, I went a whole month without buying any lunch and, it was okay and I saved $200. Maybe I can keep living this way.
Right.
So, more as an exercise in um, simplicity.
It supports us with becoming aware
Right.
of how simple life can be.
Right. And bringing awareness to your spending habits, bringing awareness to the conveniences that we sort of take for granted, but nevertheless are quite wasteful,
Yes.
not only environmentally, but also economically,
Yeah.
can bring us much greater peace of mind. A lot of times the money that we're spending on things is actually stressing us out in the long run.
Right.
And making our lives more complicated
Right.
rather than giving us our time back
Yes.
so that we can spend it with our friends and our family.
That's beautiful. I love that idea. That's amazing. So taking that spend fast and creating a certain amount of time where you only spend the money that you absolutely need and you shave off all the rest to determine how that feels and seems, and then at that end of the time take an evaluation of where you're at and what experiences you had.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's an awareness tool more than anything.
I love it.
And for me, for example, I realized I was spending way too much money on eating out, that I was coming home tired, and the convenience of having either easily, semi-prepared food in the freezer that, had a long factory chain to get to me, or just simply going out to eat,
Right.
was, spending a lot of money. My nutrition was suffering, my weight was suffering, everything was suffering. And as soon as I just stopped that, first of all, I didn't realize just how much money I was spending.
Yeah.
When it finally adds up, you're like, oh my gosh. But I started to find the act of cooking at home to be relaxing and unwinding,
Yes.
simply because I'd experimented for a month and decided I
Yes.
would do it a different way.
And
Just for
then
a short
children
time.
can join in with you too, right? In that
Absolutely.
process.
My daughter, at the time I did this, my daughter was a little young to join me much in the kitchen, but we had a good time.
That's great.
The things she could do, she'd sit on the other end of the counter and
Right. Color and
awkwardly,
play.
yes, exactly, or awkwardly, mush things.
Right. Right. That works out too, especially for mashed potatoes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That is a beautiful way to look at how we can actually evaluate our simplicity in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you have some action steps that you can take that are unique to you, they're unique to your household, they're unique to your lifestyle. It may not make sense for somebody else to quit eating out because they almost never eat out. The place
Right.
where they're needing to simplify would be in, reducing the number of magazine and newspaper subscriptions that come to the house, or,
Right.
any number of other
Right.
things.
We don't realize throughout the year how much we kind of click to subscribe. And then we by the end of the year, that fiscal year from the time we first press the button, we're like, where did all these emails and magazines and
Right.
situations came from? What
Right.
happened?
Right.
Right? We went unconscious a little bit and went click happy
Hmm.
and signed up for all these things we really don't need.
Yeah, it's easy to do. And what people don't realize is that every piece of junk email that you get, every piece of even email that you do want to have, all of this takes up electricity. All of this takes up bandwidth on a server somewhere that takes up tremendous amounts of power to
Right.
run. So there is actually a footprint to junk mail. There's
Even email.
even spam email, there's a footprint to it, a
Right.
very large one, in fact. So one thing you might do to simplify would be to go through your inbox and, unsubscribe from a
And-
whole lot of things.
And clean that out.
And clean out the spam, report the spam. You can get install a really good spam filter on your email
Yeah.
so that you're only getting the things that really matter to you, the things that are making a difference in your life somehow.
Well, and that shaves that resource of time,
Right,
right? And then you can reallocate that time to the things you really want to do,
right.
which is cooking, right? Or gathering or gardening.
Or spending time with your family or friends.
Yes.
It's I wonder how much time, if we actually audited it, that people would spend like following the ding on their email,
Right.
Oh, I have an email. What is it? And we spend all this time going through, seeing what's important, what's not important, what we spam, what we don't spam. Some people have inboxes with hundreds of emails that they haven't really dealt with
Right.
because it just becomes overwhelming really fast.
Yes.
And how much stress does that add to your life? Even background stress.
Yes.
Oh, that inbox. Oh.
That's what I wanted to share with you just for a moment, too, about that background stress. It's a really important perception that we really forget that's there. And we don't realize how it accumulates. It's like, I don't know, it's like dust in the closet that never gets cleaned out, right?
Right.
And so what does that look like for you? How can people really start to clean that out of their lives, that background stress?
Um, I sort of like to think of it as detoxing on every level.
I love that.
So, on the physical level, there's lots of ways that you can detox. For example, you can get the toxic cleaning products out of your kitchen and bathroom and replace them with greener or even homemade cleaning products like vinegar and water and stuff. Um, I know for me that not having that chemical smell in my house greatly reduces my stress level because that smell just, ugh, I go into stores and other things and I smell it. I'm like, oh, it immediately
Right.
gives me stress. Detoxing our diet,
Yeah.
taking the things out of our diet that we know are not very good for us, like diet soda and, and candy
Processed
and
food.
processed foods and things like that. Then you can detox more at an emotional level.
Yeah.
And that means, it's much tougher, but it means looking at the relationships you have in your life and whether they're feeding you or draining you,
Yes.
and drawing appropriate boundaries where
Yeah.
they need to be drawn with people so that most of your relationships anyway are nourishing and mutual and enjoyable for, everyone involved.
Everyone involved. I call that service to us.
Right.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful
And there may
concept.
be people in our lives who really take a lot more than we would like
Yeah.
to deal with. And so I can't say for certain what boundaries any person would need to draw, but for my own personal stress, I had to actually let go of a number of people that just were not in any way helpful to my life.
Right.
And it's okay if you have to do that sometimes because we only have one life. And if you're, as they say, if your cup is empty, how
Right.
can you help support all of those who count on you?
It is challenging for
Right.
sure.
And then you can, of course, detox on the more, social level. For example, is your job killing you?
Right. Right.
It could be killing you emotionally. It could be killing you physically just because it's so difficult and draining.
Or demanding, or the deadlines, or
Right.
tight schedules,
Right.
things like that.
Or maybe your boss is a tyrant or you're working in conditions where you're like physically, in danger or,
Yeah.
whatever. Looking at those kinds of things. And also, sort of detoxing the things that you buy.
Yeah.
What kind of media do you consume?
Right.
Is it feeding you and nurturing your spirit, or is it, making you feel sad and depressed about the world?
Right.
What kinds of things are you reading?
Right.
What, in print or from the
What are these
newspaper?
influences in your life that are creating the way you think
Right.
or what you value
Right.
in yourself and in
Mhm.
your family, in your home, and in society?
Right. Are you spending your money on things that are relaxing to you and nurturing to you and fulfilling to you? Or are you spending money on things that you think you need to have to keep up with the Joneses, or
Yeah.
that you think you need to spend in order to be meeting some standard?
Right.
So detoxing at every level of your person really
Exactly.
is going to create a more sustainable you.
Yes.
And then from that, you can then have the time back and the energy back, the bandwidth back to be able to participate in detoxing your household, detoxing your family, and even working towards being an active member of your community
Right.
because you have extra time and bandwidth for that
Right.
because it's not being spent on all of these background stresses.
Yes. So taking aware of background stresses is definitely a way to support radical simplicity in our lives.
Absolutely.
I love it. Well, thank you so very much for sharing with us today. It was a beautiful day of sharing these ideas of how we create this in our home.
Thank you, Ashley. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh my gosh. And so how do they reach you? How do they find what you're putting out to the world?
Sure. My website is called smallfootprintfamily.com, and it is full of articles and ideas for how you can do things like reduce the amount of trash you produce, the amount of plastic you use. There's recipes for making your own laundry detergent and your own soap and everything else. So there's lots of practical advice as well as some more philosophical ideas about radical simplicity, about spend fasting, and other ways that you can have a more self-sufficient and sustainable mindset in addition to all the things that you do. So please come to my website, see what's there. If you want my free mini book on 50 ways to love your mother and how to be sustainable in a weekend, more sustainable in a weekend anyway, you can get that there at my website. I also have a book on Amazon called Sustainability Starts at Home, How to Save Money While Saving the Planet. And you can get that on Amazon.
Wow, thank you. Those are fantastic resources.
Thank you, Ashley.
I love it. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Thank you all for listening to this podcast. We are so grateful for you tuning in and experiencing the innovations and opportunities we all can incorporate into our daily lives. Connect with us at centerforconsciouskids.com to sign up for the latest news that showcases these revolutionary services and products. Our global website provides families with an online conduit for enrichment and transformation in all our lives. Please share with other kids and families who would enjoy these advancements in living consciously. I'm Ashley Lee, and I thank you so much for joining us.